All right, let me ask you something real. Why can you push through a brutal leg session, but you can't push past that craving late at night? Why can you grind through pain, but you can't grind through boredom with food? Why does diet discipline feel psychologically heavier than training discipline, especially if you have ADHD, especially if you're a high drive, and especially if you've been obese before? You tell yourself, I'm just not disciplined with food. No. You're neurologically mismatched with how you're eating. Today, we're going to unpack blood sugar regulation, dopamine, and ADHD, why focus collapses when glucose swings, why food cravings are often a neurochemical event, and how to engineer discipline instead of trying to force it. This is not motivational crap, okay, guys? This is physiology and nervous system mechanics. So let's get into it. Okay, the brain before the bite. ADHD neurochemistry. Let's establish something. ADHD is not a focus disorder. It's a dopamine regulation disorder. The prefrontal English, the prefrontal cortex, your executive control center, runs on dopamine and norepinephrine. That's the part of your brain that's responsible for, this is the important part, impulse control, planning, delayed gratification, inhibition, and long-term decision making. ADHD brains have lower tonic dopamine baselines. They require more stimulation to activate. They struggle with delayed reward and are more sensitive to immediate reinforcement. Now, think about what hyperpalatable food does. And what is hyperpalatable food? Let's talk about that. Hyperpalatable foods are like, think of frankenfoods, think of chips, ice cream, little things that come in a box that are snacks. These are engineered to have the perfect balance of fats, sugar, and salt to give you no satiety. They don't fill you, but they will hit your craving centers in your brain like guided missiles. They are designed to make you want to eat more and not fill you so you can eat more and more and more and more. Okay? So you have hyperpalatable foods available. So what does it deliver if you're an ADHD person? An immediate dopamine spike when you eat them, an immediate reward, immediate comfort, and immediate stimulation. All the things that your ADHD brain craves. Food becomes neurological medication at that point, right? It's not weakness, it's medication. When blood sugar drops, your ADHD brain interprets that as stimulation's low. We need something right now. And guess what delivers the fastest stimulation? Sugar, fat, and salt, just like I described. All right, so let's talk blood sugar mechanics because that plays into this so that you understand what's happening behind the scenes. So, this is what's actually happening. Let's simplify it without making it boring, hopefully. You eat refined carbs, okay? Blood glucose rises really rapidly. Your pancreas releases insulin and the cells absorb that glucose. The blood glucose drops. Sometimes it overshoots. You dip below your baseline. That drop triggers the following things: a cortisol release, adrenaline release, increased hunger signaling, irritability, and anxiety. For a neurotypical brain, that's uncomfortable. For an ADHD brain, that's completely destabilizing because your dopamine signaling already runs super fragile compared to a neurotypical brain. So now you have low glucose, low dopamine, high cortisol, low executive function. And that is a perfect storm for impulsive eating, procrastination, task avoidance, mood swings, and screw it behavior. We just say, screw it. You know what? I'm going to have 10 of these cookies that I have right in front of me. You don't suddenly like discipline, okay? Your prefrontal cortex temporarily goes offline, which makes it impossible or extremely hard for you to make the right decision, right? The logical decision. So, okay, so that explains how hyperpalatable trigger foods work. But why does training, which is harder, actually feel easier than this? And training stimulates the nervous system. Dieting restricts it. Training gives you adrenaline, it gives you endorphins, it gives you a sense of achievement. It's structured from beginning to end. You know it. You have that expectation going in. You know what it's like. It has clear, measurable progress, right? Dieting, however, Long duration restraint. You have to hold for a long time. There's no applause. There's no cheer at the end. It's invisible effort. No one sees it except you. You feel it, but nobody sees the effort. And it's repeated inhibition. Okay. So your ADHD brain struggles more with inhibition than with activation. So you don't struggle to go, you struggle to stop. And that's why pushing through a brutal set feels way easier than resisting a snack at 10 p.m. Because one of them is stimulating, and the other one is restrictive. And ADHD prefers stimulation by far. So that's why it's so much easier to just push through that really hard workout and make it happen than it is to say no to that brownie or that cookie. So now let's talk about the high performer trap. Let's add stress. So high achievers often run on caffeine, delay meals, eat erratically, sleep short, and operate in sympathetic dominance. Okay? Caffeine, which is used heavily by high performers, blocks adenosine. It doesn't give energy. It actually masks your fatigue. So now blood sugar becomes volatile. In the morning, caffeine plus low food, okay, you got some wired focus, right? In the afternoon, you also have a high cortisol, which helps you. So in the morning, but in the afternoon, that cortisol drops and your glucose is now unstable, which leads to that crash, to that sugar crash. And now you start making bad decisions. And in the evening, now your impulse control is now low because you've used, your willpower and your impulse control throughout the entire day. You're tired, okay? Your fatigue is high. Now you're at very high risk of binging, right? Because you are at the lowest of the low moments. You feel like two different people, basically, in one day. It's in the morning, you're disciplined, you're good to go, no problem. You can restrict, you can make that decision all day long. But at night, you're reckless because you don't care. Your brain is telling you it is okay to skip the logic here. And that's not character weakness, okay? That's unstable glucose and depleted executive function working against you. All right, so let's fix the system. Let's come up with some solutions, right? So we're not doing surface level advice. We're going to engineer some physiological things here to give you the tools so that you can, now that you understand what's happening, so you can deal with what's happening in a better way. So the first tip, protein early and not just total, okay? Tyrosine and phenylalanine, I believe that's how it's called, which are amino acids from protein, are dopamine precursors. So low morning protein equals weak neurotransmitter support. High protein breakfast improves your focus, your satiety, and your impulse control. So you don't save calories early if ADHD is a factor, okay? You stabilize early. So you eat those proteins, that high protein breakfast, okay? Second, your carb structure. Understand that carbs are not evil, okay? Unstructured carbs are chaotic. So anchor carbs are like, say, post-training. That's where you want to anchor your carbs. Post-training is a great place to put them. In balanced meals with fiber and protein together so that you get satiety, right? You want to avoid isolated refined carb hits, which is just carbs alone, okay? No naked carbs. You don't want that ever. Okay? Because that will spike your insulin, and we know what happens. We just talked about it. 3, eat before you're starving. ADHD brains don't register mild hunger well. We can ignore them real easy. We ignore it because it's just an annoyance. But then suddenly you're ravenous, and ravenous equals low executive function, and now you're going to make bad choices because you're really hungry. So structured meal timing is the way to avoid this because you prevent your decision fatigue. Should I eat? Should I not eat? Doesn't matter. You time your meals, you space them out, and hey, it's noon, it's time for lunch. It's 3:00, it's time for that pre-workout or like afternoon snack. It's 7:00, 6:00, it's dinner time. That's it. It's past 9:00, no food here, okay? By doing this, you remove negotiation. And by removing negotiation, your executive brain doesn't have to come into play. It's time to eat or it's not time to eat. Done. Number 4, this is with caffeine. And I'm guilty of this, so I have to keep this in mind because I love caffeine. I love coffee. So high caffeine worsens your anxiety, your cortisol, your blood sugar volatility, and your ADHD hyperarousal. So moderate caffeine is always better than aggressive caffeine, okay? And focus comes from stability, not stimulation overload. So some caffeine, perfect, that's fine. Too much caffeine, bad, overstimulation, okay? It'll overload you, eventually you'll crash, it'll be bad. Number 5, sleep is executive function insurance. So sleep deprivation specifically will reduce your prefrontal activity, which we talked about. That means that you'll have less impulse control, more cravings, and more emotional reactivity. So if you sleep only 5 or 6 hours, you're biologically making your dieting harder. Okay. And there's no supplement that's going to fix this. Okay. Sleep is non negotiable. Sleep is one of the foundational things that you have to work and have uh, controlled and or optimized in order to be an optimized human being. And it affects everything from your dieting to your training to the way you think. Everything is affected by your sleep or lack thereof. So it's a non-negotiable. You got to work on it. We have many resources on this channel, by the way. Check through the video logs. There's a sleep hygiene guide, the best guide to sleep, all kinds of stuff. It's free. Just check them out. Optimize your sleep. It definitely makes a huge difference. Now, side note, and this I'm talking to those of us who are formerly obese. Okay, I want to make sure that you're covered, because there is an additional layer here, which is the emotional amplifier that is being formerly obese. So if you've been obese, glucose swings don't just trigger hunger, they trigger fear. When scale weight rises, your brain remembers your old identity, your old shame, your old patterns. So now blood sugar becomes unstable, your dopamine is unstable, and your emotional memory is now activated, okay? Because you panic and then you try to restrict harder, you overtrain, and then you snap, and that's not weakness, okay? That's unresolved metabolic trauma, and discipline requires stability, and stability requires metabolic regulation. So you have to be aware of the tendency as a formerly obese person, that you have to like keep that not panic, to be able to recognize those signals when they come, let them wash over you and deal with them. Because if you allow yourself to panic, you're going to again over restrict, they're going to course correct too hard, and you're going to crash, and it's not going to work. Okay. So let's talk about a practical daily template you could use for an example, just to give you an example of how to bring all of this together so that you can prevent binging if at all possible. So let's say in the morning you have a high protein, fiber, and moderate carb breakfast, and you hydrate before your caffeine. Big cup of water. I always do that first thing in the morning when you first wake up. You're going to be slightly dehydrated from the night before. Have a big glass of water, have your breakfast. In my case, I do fasted morning cardio first, but if you don't do fasted morning cardio, then that's, it's not relevant. But have your balanced, a high protein breakfast, okay? Around noon, midday, balanced meal before that crash window, before that 1 or 2 o'clock crash, okay? Don't allow yourself to get too hungry. Don't skip that meal, so that you're more balanced and more in control. Pre-training, assuming you train in the afternoon or early late afternoon, you want some carbs to fuel that workout, and some protein to again keep rebuilding that muscle that you're going to tear down with your workout. Post-training, you want to be a little bit protein dominant. You're going to be hungry, so that protein will help you assuage that hunger and like keep it at bay, and also again rebuild those muscles and recover. In the evening, you want high protein, you want moderate fats, and you want controlled carbs. So again, you want your carbs to be whatever it is that your diet requires. No more, no less. It doesn't mean restrict. They're not evil, but they have to be structured, okay? Controlled. What you don't want is just random carbs. Let's just like throw some carbs in there, like a whole bunch of them. And then after that dinner's done, this is important. No chaotic grazing. Anything you eat after 8 or 9 o'clock is probably bad for you. It's probably impulse driven or emotional eating. It's going to be crap. You're going to make bad choices. This is where you can add an easy, because I've done it, 5, 6, 700 calories in the evening without even realizing it, just like by grabbing snacks. So again, really important. No chaotic grazing at all. Okay. This is very, very important so that you don't overshoot your caloric goals. All right. So no chaotic grazing and no emotional carb hits late at night. Structure, by having the structure that I just described from morning till the evening, removes your decision fatigue. You don't have to use your prefrontal cortex anymore, because you know when you're supposed to eat and what you're supposed to eat. It's already planned. It's already decided. You don't have to make that decision again. So in closing, here's the reframe. Diet discipline feels harder than training because it challenges inhibition instead of activation. It exposes dopamine instability. It requires sustained executive control, and it amplifies your blood sugar fluctuations. So if you fix that glucose stability, your focus will improve, your mood will stabilize, your cravings are going to drop, and your impulse control strengthens. Not because you became stronger, but because your nervous system became stable. You don't need more willpower, you need better physiology, which is what this is all about. And when physiology aligns, discipline stops feeling like suffering, it feels automatic. And that is optimization. And that's high performance. And that is how you win this long game. All right, everybody. I hope you found that entertaining and informative. Please comment, hit like, subscribe, all the things. We have all kinds of videos related to this topic and many more about human optimization here on the channel. Let me know. Am I right? Am I wrong? Am I full of crap? Is this helpful? Anyway, please put it in the comments. Let me know, and I'll be glad to continue making videos like this, especially if you folks find it helpful. So again, thank you so much for spending your time and watching this video. There'll be more. And yeah, I hope to see you soon again with more of these topics on human optimization, ADHD brains, and high performance optimization. All right. Thank you, everybody. This is Gonzo with Rise 41, and I'm out.